Watch this video to learn how to read ligatures of more than 2 notes.
Welcome to this new video about White Mensural Notation. I'm Ricardo and my job is to help you to learn Renaissance music theory and to discover all the secrets about early music. In this fourth video about White Mensural Notation, we talk about ligatures with more than 2 notes. This is an example of a 5 notes ligature. The correct method to read a ligature with more than 2 notes is to separate the first and the last note from all the ligature. Let's see an example. Let's consider this ligature and let's separate the first and the last note from this ligature. So don't consider this note and don't consider these other notes. The first rule for ligature with more than 2 notes is that all the notes between the first and the last one are brevis, are usually brevis. So we have brevis, 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 brevis. If I want, at the place of all these brevis, for example, a longa or a maxima, I have to add something that now we see. For example, I want to transfer this note in a longa. How can I do that? The rules is very simple. Remember the previous video with the rules for 2 notes ligatures. I said that if I want to transfer a brevis to longa, like in this example, I have to add a descending pilum at the right of the note brevis, longa, and also in this case brevis, longa. For the same rule, to transform this brevis to longa, I have to add a right pilum, right descending pilum. Remember also that the left descending pilum transforms a longa in a brevis. So, because in a ligature all the middle notes are brevis, it is impossible that this pilum refers to the right note, because the right note is already brevis. So, all the pilum like this are right pilum that transform a brevis to longa. So, this brevis now is longa. Be careful. As you can see, this is like a pilum, because I have a conjunction between the 2 notes, but it is not a pilum. So remember that the pilum must go under the square for some space. Let's see a case. This is a ligature of 2 ascending notes. So now we know that this ligature is composed of a brevis plus another brevis. And I know that if I add here a line, I transform the first note in a longa. But what happens if I write this? This is a pilum? Not. This is not a pilum. This is the connection, the conjunction between the first and the second note. So this is brevis plus brevis. If I want a longa plus brevis, I have to write the pilum that goes down. This is the pilum, so this is longa brevis. For this reason, this line is not a pilum, it is a conjunction. It's a conjunction between the first and the second note. For this reason, this is a brevis. This rule of the pilum is okay, is valid for all ligatures, 2 notes ligature and more than 2 notes ligatures. Now let's consider this ligature. As I said, at this moment don't look at the first and the last note. So don't consider the first and the last note. How are the middle notes? The main rule says that all the middle notes are brevis. But I see 2 descending pilums. So, because the descending pilums, it is only a right pilum, as I have just explained. This pilum refers to the left note, because the pilum is always at right. So I have longa. This other pilum refers to this note because it is at the right of this note, so longa, and this is a brevis, and this is a brevis. Simple, it is not difficult. As I said in the previous video, I can write in ligature also the maxima. But how can I do it? We can recognize a maxima by his form. So this is a maxima because of his form. This is a brevis because it is a middle note without any sign. This is a longa because I have a right descending pilum, and this is a brevis because it doesn't have anything. The maxima can stay also at the beginning or at the end of a ligature, but the maxima has its specific form, so I can recognize it by the maxima, by the form. Like that, at the beginning, at the end. As in modern notation, also in Renaissance music notation, in mensural notation, exists the dot. So we don't talk about the dot in this video, but it is important at this moment to know that if I want to add a dot to a note written in ligature, I can do it writing the dot above the note that is dotted. For example, if I want to dot the first note, I can do it by adding here a dot. If I want to add a dot to this note, I can do it by writing here a dot. Now let's try to read this ligature. At the moment, don't consider the first and the last note. Remember that the oblique form has only 2 notes, the first and the second. So these notes are brevis, brevis, longa because of the pilum, maxima because of its form. So the longa is dotted, also the first note, but at this moment it is not important, which is the value of the first note. Now let's try to add a ligature in a context. As I said, on a ligature can be only 1 syllable, so we must sing all the ligature with legato. But what happens if I have 2 notes with the same pitch? In this case, I can't write them in the same ligature, so I have to break the ligature. But in my mind, I know that it is only 1 ligature, so I have always to consider the context. In the same way, if I have a sequence of many ligatures, semi-brevis and semi-brevis, with opposita proprietate, I have to consider only 1 ligature, for example, in this case. Because in this case I can't write all these figures in 1 ligature, because the ascending left line can be used only with 2 notes to have semi-brevis and semi-brevis. I have to break all the ligature in a consistent number of 2 notes ligatures. Now let's talk about the first and the last note of a ligature. To read the first and the last note of a ligature of more than 2 notes, I only have to apply all the rules I've explained you about 2 note ligatures in the previous video. So let's see an example. This is an example of a more than 2 notes ligature. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 notes. At this moment, don't consider the last note. How are the middle notes? I have a brevis, I have a maxima, and I have a brevis. So, to understand the value of the first notes, I have to remember all the cases of the previous video. So, this note goes in an ascending direction. It is like this case. in which two ascending notes are brevis plus brevis. Because this is the beginning note, I only have to consider the first note of this case, that is brevis. So the first note is brevis. Let's see another case. This is the same case of this situation. This is the same case than the previous, with only one difference. This pilum, this descending right pilum. So these other notes are the same: brevis, maxima, brevis, and we don't know which is the last note at the moment. But the first note is like this. This note goes to an ascending direction. So, like this, in these ligatures I have longa and brevis. This is not important for this situation because I only have to consider the first note. Because it is the same situation, I have a longa. Now let's see this other case. In this case I have a maxima, I have a brevis, and the last note I don't know what it is. But look at the first note, it is like this. That is longa, longa. We don't consider the second note, but the ligature goes in a descending direction, so the first note is longa. Now let's consider this case that is the same than this, but with only one difference: the left descending pilum on this note. So this figure is like that. That is brevis longa. So here I have a brevis and not a longa because the descending pilum at the left. It is very simple. Now let's consider this other example. In this example I have brevis, as I've just explained you, brevis because it is a middle note, maxima because of its form, brevis because it is a middle note, brevis because it is a middle note, and this is longa because this figure is the same of that. In this situation I have longa, longa, so I have to consider only the right note because it is the descending, it is the last note of a ligature, of a more than two notes ligatures. The ligatures at the end goes in a descending direction, so this is longa. The first note is brevis because it is a middle note, so I have to separate the first and the last note. This other example is the same case, but I have the obliqua form at the end. This obliqua form is the same like that. This ligature is longa, brevis. The first is longa, and the second is brevis because of the obliqua form. In this case I have maxima, brevis, brevis, not longa, because it is a middle note, so I have to consider the notes that are not the first and the one as middle notes, but the last note is brevis because the obliqua form like this. Now let's see this ligature. As you can see, I have brevis because this note goes in an ascending direction. The second note is brevis because it is a middle note. This other note is a maxima because of its form, brevis because it is a middle note, brevis because it is a middle note. And how is this note? Simple. This is an ascending note, so I have to consider this case in which I have brevis, brevis, two ascending notes are brevis, brevis, so this is a brevis. remember that it is not important how is the first note. I have only to consider the last one. Now let's see this other example. This is the same that the previous, but with only one difference, this right pilum. This form is like that. It is like this ligature that is brevis, longa. So this note is longa. Very simple. The method for reading ligature is very simple if I understand the mechanism that goes around all these rules. It may seem very complicated, but some exercises can be very useful. Now let's see a particular case. In this example, I want to write in ligature the sequence of pitches. So let's try to do that. As you can see, I must break in this point the ligature, because it is not possible to write all these notes in only one ligature. Why? This is the reason. If I try to write these figures, these values in a ligature, I arrive in this situation in which I have a longa, but I can't write a brevis because I have to use the obliqua form. I can't write here because it is impossible to write that. It doesn't mean anything. So the only thing I can do is to break the ligature. And now the last thing. How can I write semi-brevis in ligatures? So this is an example. This is a ligature with a vertical left line on the first note that makes the first and the second notes semi-brevis and semi-brevis. The other notes follow the rules we now know. So, maxima, brevis, brevis, and brevis. Remember that the vertical left line at the beginning of a ligature of more than 2 notes transforms only the first and the second note, not the others. Well, for this video now it's enough. Subscribe the Semi-brevis membership on my Patreon page to download the PDF of this video with the explanation, with exercises, and to support my channel for my activity of teaching Renaissance music theory. I hope that this video has been useful for you, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! Do you want to download the PDF of this video? Subscribe the Semi-brevis membership on my Patreon and have the access to all the PDFs of all my videos.